What's up, guys? This is EJ Stewart. You are listening to New Generation Media's X-Men 97 recap and review episode 5 here. We're talking about X-Men Remember It. And man, when I tell you guys this was an absolute banger, I really don't know what else to say. We got to get right into it. Joining me are my guys, Shamari, Kendall, and Sham. Like I said, when I think about episodes I've watched of superhero animation, this one will stand for a very long time. I think this is one of those episodes you watch, you say, I'm gonna remember the time when I watched X-Men episode 95, episode X-Men 97, episode 5, Remember Sham. I think this is one of those episodes. Do you agree with that?
This was a banger. This definitely was a banger. I mean, it kind of just kept going. It's one of those episodes. Is like, wow, it's still going. We're not done yet.
Long
So
episode.
it was a long episode. A lot happened. Um, it was really good. It was a really, really good episode. A lot, very, high stakes in this episode. It's just very unexpected. Um, Especially coming off of last week. I mean, coming off of last week, I was like, okay, so what's going on with Storm? Like, can I figure out what's going on with Storm? And then this happens. It's like, oh, so yeah, this was definitely a welcome surprise for sure.
Kendall on the podcast as well. Kendall, I said that this was a banger. Do you feel the same way?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think most, if not all people that have tuned into X Men '97 and have tuned into these reviews would understand that this is probably the best episode we've had so far. Certainly, the most climactic episode that we've had.
For sure.
Um, the like Shamari said, the crescendo of it all, like where it just keeps on coming and it keeps on hitting. And um, it's funny. Like just a quick anecdote. Like I finished watching the episode, and our parents were watching the episode a little bit after me. So when I was done watching it, I come walking in, and they're right in the like pretty much the middle scene when Rogue and Gambit are talking, and right before they go back to Genosha, and you know our dad's like, man, this episode is crazy. And in my head, I'm like,
You ain't
nothing's
seen
even
nothing
happened
yet.
yet.
You ain't
Yeah, I
seen
haven't seen
nothing
anything
yet.
yet, but I didn't
Yeah.
say anything. But I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. But like, but man, it's that was all you need to know about. Um, Again, the level of excitement that this episode brought from beginning to end, and like I said, really the episode starts after that moment, after that scene when they go back to Genosha and everything just goes haywire. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Jay. This is definitely a memorable moment on the pantheon of great X Men stories and great X Men moments, on the pantheon of great superhero animation. There are some episodes of Young Justice that I think about in recent years. Some episodes of Spectacular Spider-Man. There's episodes of Teen Titans that are on that list, and Batman the animated series. Like that's what this show has put itself in the conversation with, just with this episode. So again, shout out to
There's no mincing any words anymore. Rogue has to make a real decision when it comes to deciding, will she side with Magneto as he offers her the opportunity to be his queen or his right hand in this new age of Genosha in the United Nations, or will she side with Gambit? That's one angle of this, but trust me, that is not where the love triangles end. We have a love triangle between Cyclops, Madeline Pryor, and Jean Grey. When Jean finds out that Cyclops is still having, essentially an emotional relationship still with Madeline Pryor through the astral plane, which is something taken right from the comics. Jean has caught Scott with Emma Frost and others in the past in these kind of instances. So the fact that they even put that in the show was dope. And then you have Jean trying to figure out her memories and figure out who she is, and her having that kiss with Wolverine, and that now being an element. And then Jean and Scott have this big fight, the dialogue and this stuff. is top notch. I know I've complained about the dialogue at times in the past being one of the only things I think that's kind of lagged behind everything else. And I'm not saying it's perfect here, but I felt like some of the lines delivered and some of the lines written in these episodes, especially the dialogue, the conversation between Scott and Gene, are just absolute awesome stuff. Shamar, where do you begin in terms of where this episode went and what worked well for you?
I mean, I agree with everything that you said, EJ. I thought the relationship drama that they showed us worked really well. Everything with Rogue and Magneto and Gambit, of course. And it was funny watching this be a Gambit episode. I'm like, boy, you just got to be loving this. There's a lot of Gambit in
This is what I've been waiting for, man. This is what the streets wanted. This is what the streets needed, and damn it, we got it. Shout out to the crew because Gambit has been a little bit somewhat on the sidelines. I mean, he's had this obvious budding love triangle with him and Magneto, so it's not like he's been totally sidelined. But this was definitely putting your boy front and center, which I love.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, that was done really well. Gambit was very front and center in this, which is very nice. Um, and honestly, everything was done well. How Genosha was portrayed was done
Mm,
really well. Um, I also really liked the interviews that were being done at the mansion,
yeah,
especially the one with Scott. Boy, when Scott blew up, I was like, man, I got it. Can I write down some of what he said when he blew up? Because I was like, man, he was just he. That was just one. That was like a line out of a comic book where I was like, yeah, this is like what the X-Men is about. It was about this kind of tension.
yeah.
Um,
He was
so
introduced to. First of all, Nightcrawler makes his move here. We see Nightcrawler here for the first time in this season. I enjoyed this version of Nightcrawler. I felt like a lot of versions of Nightcrawler we've gotten, whether it be in Wolverine and X Men. I'm gonna exclude X Men Evolution because I think they're the only ones that don't apply to this. But the X Men the animated series, the movies, I feel like they harken a lot on kind of the darker, edgier side of Nightwing. Oh, excuse me, Nightwing, Jesus, Nightcrawler, and I like that this Nightcrawler is more playful. I like that this Nightcrawler had a little more humor. I like that he was obviously very happy with where things were, where his position was. Kind of being kind of a faith leader a little bit in on Genosha, but also just kind of where Genosha was moving and his optimism. Because I think at times I feel like a lot of versions we've seen, whether it be live action or animation, has kind of led with the pessimism for Nightcrawler. It's been kind of what he's been through, the fact that people think he's a freak and that his Catholicism is kind of his only respite from the world. But like Nightcrawler is not like he's not always pessimistic. In fact, there's just as much stuff of him being kind of like a very much a I don't say comic relief. I wouldn't go that far, but he definitely brings a little bit of levity to the team, and he sometimes he does that through his faith. And I felt like this show, this episode, I thought really painted him just in a totally different light. Like if you watch those episodes of Nightcrawler in the X-Men animated series, he's nothing like this. It's an about face, which kind of comes with some risk because some people will say, well, is this necessarily the guy we saw from the previous time? That's would be a fair thing, but I enjoyed this version of Nightcrawler. How did you feel about Kurt Wagner addition to this one? Because I feel like X-Men Evolution did a really good job, I think, of really making Nightcrawler truly get a more lighthearted character. But again, most other iterations, I don't think he's really like that.
yeah, I mean it's interesting. It's funny because when I was watching this, the first Nightcrawler that came up in my mind was X Men Evolution.
Yeah,
Um, that was probably the last. And I'm sure Kendall is very familiar with that Nightcrawler. But yeah, it's
Very.
probably the last. It's probably the last like I guess you could say Nightcrawler like this that I remember seeing. Um, so yeah, and I agree. It's definitely not like the Nightcrawler that we saw in the original show. I liked it. I enjoyed seeing Nightcrawler. Um, hope we get to see more of Nightcrawler. I know, of course, a lot happened at the end
yeah.
of the episode, which I'm sure we'll get to. but I did enjoy this portrayal. I agree with you. Definitely very different from other iterations. You know, the other one that stands out in my mind is the movie version, which of course was just very serious. Um, they even like had him all mind controlled and attacking the president and stuff like that. So it was a very very serious situation. Um, so yeah, this is I enjoyed seeing this version of Nightcrawler with a little bit more levity as well.
I wanna get to we'll get to the major development of the A story in this in a moment. I want to get to the B story aspect of this, Kendall, and how they decide to play this aspect of it, because the B side of this could have been the A side. I mean, there's a lot going on in the B side of this story. So, as Kendall mentioned, and he said he enjoyed it, and I agree as well. There's a news team doing essentially a news special or a news story on the X Men, and the reporter is there. So it's kind of like their way to kind of show the world, like, how mutants live, and this special team that's been doing it. It feels very
uh, wild. Like you said, you don't really see him in that manner. At least not this kind of Cyclops that we've seen so far. It's definitely more of a push towards the darker, edgier Cyclopses that we've had. Which is ironic because at the beginning we were like, "Yeah, I'm glad we're not getting the sad, soapy, mopey, Cyclops that we that we got from Wolverine the X-Men," and we're kind of seeing the trend and the downward trend towards that character. So that's funny, but um, no, I mean this has been that was an interesting moment. I think that was sort of like that was sort of a lot of pent up like emotion and sort of anger that this is a guy that has been kind of taking the high road constantly, listening to Charles and constantly taking the high road, and Charles is not even in his ear anymore. And like you said, all these things are unraveling, and
yep.
It's hard for him to manage it all while this is happening. And so that moment, I think all of that kind of came to a head a little bit. But yeah, no, I thought that was an interesting moment for his character. What I love about this show, not really changing the subject, but just in general, what I love about this show is that when this show was first announced and we talked about it on our podcast, and um, even maybe at the beginning with these review series, I thought there was a little bit. While I was excited for it, I thought there may have been a missed opportunity to create a new X-Men series as opposed to going back and retelling this show. Um, as exciting as an idea that this was. But what I love about it is that clearly they're not operating like this is just season 5 or season 6 of X-Men the animated series. Like yes, that is part of it. That's part of it. But I think we are watching the transformation and the metamorphosis of this show becoming a completely new show, and the status quo is being lifted as we speak. And they're changing everything about what the original show was and saying, this is a new X-Men show. Yes, we're taking the other stuff as a source material, and what is effective by doing that is obviously you have the nostalgia part of it that's effective, but what's also effective from a story standpoint is we don't have to ask the question, what world do we live in? Because how many of these superhero shows do we ask? You watch Young Justice and you're like, well, what's happened so far in the DC universe? How many times has Batman fought Joker? How many times has Superman fought Lex Luthor? How old is this person? What adventures, what stories have they gone on already? Well, in this show, which again is essentially sort of a new show, we know the source material, and so while I've said even on these podcasts and on these reviews, man, like I wish we could have gotten, I wish we could have gotten more, moments for Wolverine. I wish we could have gotten more moments for, Jubilee or this one and that one. You mentioned Gambit, who got a lot of moments in this episode. And man, there's only 10 episodes. How are we gonna squeeze all that in there? They're not worried about squeezing all that in there because they have 90 episodes of X-Men the animated series. If you really want to see more about these characters, go watch the old show. There's plenty of stuff in that. So I actually commend them for the idea, because as you're seeing it and as you're seeing it play out, like they're not just saying we're just going to do 10 more episodes of X-Men the animated series.
Yes, exactly.
Because they realized that wouldn't have been an effective strategy. It would have been, you could have played the hits and made 10 great singular stories, kind of like a what if kind of thing. But they decided no, we're telling something that's transforming the show into something a lot far deeper and a lot more different than the other show was.
Yeah, Sham, I feel like I think Kendall hit the nail on the head. To me, like I watched this episode and I thought if there was any kind of question or concern that hey, this is gonna be a show that's only gonna play the hits and just give you nostalgia, just do the '90s show all over again. I felt like this episode really kind of cemented that that's not going to be the case. Now, I think too, and that's been a critique, especially the earlier episodes of this season. Now, I think to me I think that they've kind of been already hinting that this is going to happen. Like you saw, Storm have what happened to her. Now she's off the team right now. Right now, people who are on the team, the
previous recaps. I don't know if we'll ever get like a real solid answer in terms of like when the switch happened and what exactly, or her memories, what aren't her memories. I feel like that may be left ambiguous, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I do hope we get some kind of resolution in terms of like just what this relationship is, and doesn't have to happen like right away, but I do think that's something that they should probably do at some point.
So, I really, I just get some predictions. Like I feel like what's gonna end up happening. I think you'll see, not for the first time per se, but I think you're gonna see a show really delve into what does a Jean Grey Wolverine relationship look like. I think you'll see Jean go with Wolverine. I think you'll see Cyclops find some other love interest. Is it Madeline Pryor? I'm not exactly sure. It could be. I also think that it could be someone else. We saw Emma Frost for the first time on this show in this episode. She seems very much still in her kind of Hellfire Club era of the Emma Frost character, which if there was anything that probably disappointed me, maybe that was it a little bit. Only because that era. What you thinking of?
I was like, well, the status quo's been lifted now. I mean, Sebastian Shaw looked like he was putting a body bag at the end of the episode.
Well, that is true. That
holds true.
I mean, you say a body bag. I mean, was he not evaporated? Like, I don't even know if there's a bag to put.
Well, we just all we saw was his eyes all glazed. He was laying there.
I guess that's true. He does go in the body bag. You're right about that. Like, so, yes, that is true. So, and this could get sped up, and I guess we'll have to get to the A side here. So, A side of the story, which that whole thing we just talked about, all that could have been an A side, which shows you just how crazy this episode is. But the A side of the story is, again, this trip to Genosha. And shout out to the crew. I think they did a really good job of really, they presented Genosha and they took a lot of inspiration from different things. I think you see some Wakanda inspiration. I think you see a lot of Krakoa inspiration as well. I think the fact that there's a council, the fact that there are people from multiple parts of the mutant world that all have a say in it, very similar to the council that is on Krakoa currently, as that show, as that series, that era of the X-Men kind of winds down in the comics. They and kind of presenting almost like a utopia type of world. This is not your grandfather's Genosha. This is definitely different, and again, they definitely took those.
Genosha from Dark Phoenix, where they're just kind of like on a village.
I be honest, man. I don't remember anything from that movie. I watched it once and forgot everything. So when you told me, I can't believe Genosha's even in that movie.
When they showed the Genosha in Jubilee's like memories, that's what it kind of reminded me. It reminded me of that. I was a little worried. I was like, oh man, this is like that movie Genosha.
Tarzan,
dance and the kiss. That's not what she wanted, and then that it is indeed Gambit who she wanted. Now Gambit doesn't know that. He already stormed off and walked away after seeing this charade happen. And I do call it charade because I'm a Gambit fan, and I'll be honest, I was mad. I felt bad for my boy. Like I understand Magneto's Magneto, but Gambit's been a ride or die, and he was kind of thrown to the wayside here. But I'm glad it took Rogue very quickly to realize that Magneto wasn't it. So I think the internet's definitely been shipping Magneto and Rogue. So I think I'm sitting in the minority and saying I was very happy to see that blow up very fast because Mr. and Mrs. X is Gambit and Rogue, and they deserve to be together. They belong to be together, as far as I'm concerned. But it's at that point in time where all hell breaks loose. It begins with Cable showing up to see Madeline Pryor and giving her warning, being like, "What's going on?" Where it's like, "Oh no,
Which
I'm too late."
that alone is like the first mind blown moment. Honestly, it's just with Cable showing up. I'm like, wait, is that Cable?
Yeah, that's what Cable walking by. I'm like, "What the hell?" I'm like, "Okay." I'm like, "That this can't be good." Like he never shows up and something good is happening. So I'm like, "This isn't good." Let's see what's going on, and of course, he's like, "Oh no, I'm too late," whatever, and he disappears, and that's when you see the explosions happen, and that's where you see the beginning of the mutant genocide on Genosha. There's a lot of ways we can go here on this, but Sham, that aspect of the story, what were your thoughts on kind of how they took it from the Rogue Gambit Magneto decision to the beginning of the absolute massacre that happens on Genosha, which is again not anything we've kind of seen on X-Men the animated series, just mutants just getting murked, and not like, I mean, we'll get to some of the mutants that go and it's set very soon, but like not like, oh, just some like anonymous guy, like people who have been in the show for years, like Callisto and and the rest of the Morlocks, and like Killing Mr. Sebastian Shaw just getting murked. I'm just like, yo, am I watching what do you say?
Dazzler.
Dazzler.
Like
I'm watching
Dazzler,
this.
then she winds up in a body bag.
Yeah, I'm watching this joint thing. Yo, am I watching Invincible? Like, what's the hell is going on here? So, how'd you feel about the Genosha aspect once that story turned?
Man, that was just very unexpected. It made me glad that they don't have like a next time on X-Men the animated series kind of thing. Because I was like, man, I'm so glad I had no idea that any of this was gonna happen. that was just wonderfully done. Cable shows up, like you said, EJ. Like Cable's not here for no reason. Something bad's gonna happen. He's gonna try to prevent something bad from happening. Either he's gonna save the day, and then once he disappeared, I'm like, oh no, whatever was gonna happen is just gonna happen. And you see things start blowing up, and then that giant Sentinel, and I'm like, okay, boy, and he's just black.
Epic last stand you will ever see in an animated series. Him taking out a fleet of Sentinels using his powers. And I will say this, the way this show celebrates the abilities of the mutants on it, I just think I cannot speak enough to how much they're doing such a great job for really giving love to everybody. We talked about it last episode with Jubilee. We talked about it previously with Cyclops the first episode, Storm in the first episode, like Morph, absolutely, and like there are times where people always make the joke like, oh, when we say, oh, we'll have an X-Men and Avengers fight, and it's like, well, the Avengers would murder them, but like sometimes I think some of that is like just because I think writers haven't been as creative with like just how powerful like all these individual mutants are and what their potential is, and I feel like this is a show where they're like, let's read every comic and read everything under the sun and see what these people's powers are and how that could be effectively applied in battle and combat. Yeah, they're not like breaking. They're not broken. Like Gambit's not broken. These are all things he's capable of. But it almost seemed like, I feel like all these characters, him, Jubilee, whatever, it seemed like they like, for either lack creativity or not wanting to feel like their characters were overpowered. They always seem to kind of keep their power simplified. But like Gambit was just doing stuff that I've just never seen him do in an animated show or anything. Like he was just, I mean, he's just slicing the heads off of Sentinels with like his bow. First of all, the fact that he's able to contract and retract his bow. I mean, again, things that they never really showed before. And again, the way, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I got a question, and EJ, you may know this. Kenny, you may know too. Why it can't Magneto like do anything with the Sentinels? Are they made of like a specific kind of like metal or alloy or
probably like plastic or something like that, or some sort of
non-metal?
Yeah, maybe not plastic, but something that he can't control. I'm assuming.
That's what
That
I'm
would be
wondering. 'Cause
okay.
I'm like, I mean, they're pretty hard. I
But
mean, is it? Is it?
because
I
it's
mean,
funny because X-Men Evolution, the Sentinels, I believe, are metal. And I believe even
right.
in Days of Future Past, right?
Yeah, yeah, they're
Like,
definitely they're 100.
the metal, Magneto doesn't have
Or
a problem with
no,
them.
actually, I think I-
Or does
because
he
Magneto had to
defeats
put
him?
something in them to
Right,
control them. So I forgot what he said they were
right,
made
that's
of,
what it was.
but yeah,
Right,
that could be something like that. I guess I don't know.
right.
Yeah, I think definitely in Days of Future Past they made it a point that like they're not made of the same kind of metal he can control. So I always work on the assumption when he can't just move them all over the place that these are Sentinels that aren't made with the kind of metal that he can control. Which you would think that if people were smart and this guy is the most notorious terrorist in the world, that they would know how to neutralize him to some degree. So
Right.
so yeah, he was having obviously a very tough time with these the Sentinels. But I mean, at the same time, it was a fleet. I mean, it was just like unlimited number, and their power again was up to a whole different level than what we're used to seeing. And it leads to the ultimate sacrifices from Magneto, who same time, which will also make you maybe believe that it is Cassandra Nova who's behind it. So that definitely appears to be where we're pointing to. Which I mean, this show is interesting because we sat there at New York Comic Con for the panel for this show, and they told us about Mr. Sinister being the villain. And I'm watching this joint being like, there's no way Mr. Sinister is doing this. Like, there's just no way. Like, Sentinels aren't his thing. I don't even think he has like the manpower to like create this kind of weaponry that could just wipe mutants just completely off the face of the earth the way these Sentinels were doing. What do you say?
Like, this would feel like it'd be against. Like, what would even be the point? Like, this feels like this would be against a lot of his
Yeah,
mindset and
he's
mentality.
all about creating the most purest, strongest mutants that he can then control. Like again, just killing a bunch of people doesn't seem to add up. So I don't know why that would happen. I I look I look at this and I say there's got to be a Cassandra Nova aspect to it. Some people wonder if Bastion's behind it. Who Bastion's like the evil version, clone version of Magneto, but I don't really see that happening here. So that appears to be where we're going. I don't know if that means Cassandra Nova is the larger X-Men villain of the season, and the whole, Sinister being the villain was just kind of like a swerve. But
Well,
watching this, it was very clear this was not the work of Mr. Sinister. That was obvious
The
almost immediately.
the Cassandra Nova aspect that is interesting. One part about that is interesting is obviously this is an MCU property, and a lot of what we've heard, or at least being rumored with Deadpool, is that she may possibly be the villain of Deadpool. She may be involved in Deadpool 3.
Yeah.
We see a shot of her, what we think is Cassandra Nova, in the trailer, and so them using her in this show, that's going to end a couple months or a month before, you know, Deadpool comes out, is classic Marvel, kind of brand synergy, and just Marvel, using animation to help introduce a concept and a character and a villain to their larger audience before you're gonna get in Deadpool. We don't know that for a fact, but
Right. Yeah. It's
um,
true.
but yeah, no. I mean, I think that that's interesting, and obviously, we assumed that was going to happen with Mister Sinister. I mean, there's been rumors that Mister Sinister is, on the table as a potential villain in the live action space for X Men with the MCU, and obviously, we've gotten him already in this show so far. But I still wouldn't rule out us seeing more of him. But his, like you said, his arc feels like it's running. Like, are we? I mean, are we supposed to assume Magneto and Gambit are just off the board now? I mean, we
Yeah.
don't necessarily see Magneto's body, right? I mean, we don't necessarily know what
No.
happens to him, but I mean, we're supposed to assume that he's gone. But as we know in this space, unless you get the confirmed kill, anything's
Yeah.
possible. Like you said, Gambit, we got to confirm kill, which is unfortunate.
Oh
But
yeah.
Magneto, we did not. So I do wonder what the status quo is now. Now that it's been shifted, it reminds me not to before I finish. It reminds me a lot of X-Men Evolution. I know I mentioned I was never going to mention the show, but you guys have mentioned it multiple times on this episode, so I'll go back to it. X-Men, it reminds me a lot of X-Men Evolution. The end of season 2, when the mutants are outed by the Sentinels, very similar. But the
Yeah.
mutants are outed by the Sentinels, and Magneto kind of outs the mutants to the world. And I mean, that's an all-thousand in my mind. That was an all-time great episode and moment in animation as well. But like that was a major shift of the status quo of the show, because that whole series was about the mutants kind of being undercover, going to school, and this and that. And then at the blink of an eye, everyone in the world knows everyone's a mutant. And they
Yeah.
know now Cyclops is a mutant and Jean Grey's a mutant and blah blah blah. And so that becomes the moment going into season 3. And at the same time, the X-Mansion's blowing this crazy episode. But regardless, this reminded me a lot of that, where you're just like, where does this show go now? Because the show that I've been watching is not the same show anymore after something like this happened.
It's not. Now I think Cable. So just looking at like these episodes, like man, like I know we talked about like wanting to like just get like finish the Storm story so we can get her back to the X-Men. Like I tell you what, like Life Death Part 2 is the next episode. Like the last thing I want to deal with right now is Storm and Forge in the middle of nowhere. I know that story is awesome and like we gotta have it, but man, I'm just like we're gonna leave what just happened and we're gonna go to a Storm story here. You'll see how that ends up
And,
going.
and that goes back to what we talked about last week, where we were like, last week's 2 episodes kind of could have ran. You had no idea when they were taking place in time. It's like this could have been a
Right.
week apart. This could have been weeks apart, a month. Like now, like this next Life Death episode, like I feel like we should have an understanding. We're gonna know whether or not is this just a
Yeah,
complete
because she just
continuation of the last
ignored the
episode?
fact. Right.
Yeah, or is it going to be, or are they going to react to what we've seen as well? Because I feel like you can't ignore it. I would think, but it's called part
I
two
mean,
of a part one that had nothing to do with that.
yeah, and it's definitely separated from just larger story, so they very well might. And it's the episode was so big. A lot of times that shows do it all the time. We had this massive kind of cliffhanger or whatever, and we say, okay, let's take a step back and kind of take you here before we get back into all that just happened. So again, a lot is on the table for this. I mean, this was truly wild. Again, the small things. Kendall mentioned the Watcher. Also, another Omega level mutant detected moment with Magneto. The establishing yet another Omega level mutant. The fact that that's again part of this conversation, part of this show, the canon of the show, I think is absolutely fantastic. So, man, this was one of those episodes that kind of just left you. I sat there at this episode. I just sat there and didn't do anything for like 15 minutes. I was just like, yo, what did I just watch? That was crazy. This was like Red Wedding, Game of Thrones. Like this was the X-Men mutant versions of that. And if you love the X-Men, you know about the genocide of the Genosha, but like seeing it play out in that way in live action, something we've never seen before in live action, or or animation, any kind of like anything off of the pages of the comics. It really did give you that Red Wedding feel. It really kind of really established just the kind of atrocity that was happening, and X-Men are gonna have a whole lot on their hands to obviously get them out of this, or it may not be in their hands. Maybe it's Cable. It's Cable fixes. We have Life Death is episode 6, episode 7 is Bright Eyes, and when Madeline Pryor sees Cable, I think she says, those bright eyes, like I know you're my son." So I assume episode 7 is a Cable episode, and that's going to be purely about, I guess, him trying to figure out what's going on, get back to time where we will see more of how the future is. I'm sure it's not great considering he had to come back and try to stop this event from happening, and that leads us to a 3-part finale. Episodes 8, 9, and 10. Tolerance is extinction. Who knows what the hell that means? But that definitely sounds very ominous. I don't know why I can't say that word. I'm in this. So man, we're in for a ride. This show is. I mean,
A new show, like you guys have said. So this is vastly exceeded my expectations. Um, and I agree. I think this is the best thing Marvel has done in a very, very long time. I hope, you know, the ratings will reflect that. I hope the leadership at Marvel will take notice, and the leadership at Disney will take notice as well, and that they start using these characters more often because this is such high quality content, you know. So I've been very pleased with what we've seen, and I'm excited to see more.
let's get the scores of this episode. So this is X-Men episode 5. Remember it. I'll go first. I know I usually go last here. I'm giving this a full 10. I'm giving this a 10 out of 10. I have no qualms. We've done so many reviews on this YouTube channel and on these podcasts, whether it be the Marvel shows from Disney Plus, movies from Marvel and DC, Young Justice reviews, again, movies from both DC and Marvel, and I don't give out 10s easy. I don't know. I could probably count on probably one hand the amount of times I've given out of 10. This is the easiest 10 I've ever given on anything I've watched since we've been doing this podcast. This was exceptional. And to think we're watching this show, and then, like Kendall mentioned, I think before we got on, like, we watched this episode, and just before any of that Jadosa genocide happens, you're watching this being like, this is incredible. This is an incredible episode. The interpersonal dynamics that they're putting on display and how they're playing these things out, it's working just 100% to a T. And we don't even get to the truly, I say good, but it's a horrific scene at the end. It's just phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. I also thought, like, again, I don't want to, like, lose her side in this. I thought Rogue was really great in this episode too, because I feel like the previous show tried to give Rogue a lot of depth as well, but I feel like the emotional depth I felt from Rogue here just felt raw, more raw than I feel like any other time I've watched her on this show or the previous X-Men the animated series. Like, she talks a lot about her the kind of the curse that she lives with, but just her explaining it to Gambit, her making the case to kind of going back and forth with Magneto, the raw emotion she feels as people are dying and she's trying to save people, like, that's a level of emotion I just feel like I don't know if we really captured because they kind of were so hell bent on kind of making her just like the fun Southern belle, even though she's a tortured character. And they do talk about it. I don't want to poo-poo the last show. I mean, that's one of my favorite shows of all time. But this just felt way more raw, way more personal, way deeper, with pretty much everything that happens to her on this show. Like, this Rogue also was so much more depth than what you're used to seeing. Again, it's something that's non-comic. So this was an easy 10, easiest 10.
But and plus, and also one of the things that Bo DeMeo mentioned in his long Twitter post was he said episode 5 is just a warm up. He said episode 10, episode 8 through 10. He said those are the big ones. So
oh yeah, I mean, you doing a 3-part finale. I'm expecting a movie, like which
yeah.
I now know is not there. There aren't expectations this show can't meet for me at this point. There isn't.
Right.
Like, we came back from last week's episode feeling like maybe a little fillery but fun, and you come to this, like...
Yeah. I mean, I think the most jaw-dropping thing that I've seen on Disney Plus, in the Disney Plus era, Shamari may agree, is probably the end of the Star Wars Clone Wars run by Dave Filoni, the final season, last 4 episodes. This has a chance to top that with what they've set up. I don't know if it will, but there's a strong chance that it'll top it if it can keep with this kind of same momentum. Because that's what this calls back to.
Yeah. You mentioned Bo DeMeo again. We don't know. We still somehow don't know what the deal is with him. Marvel may have some explaining to do soon about why he's gone.
Yeah, because he's coming out talking, saying, like, I mean, he didn't say what happened, but the fact that he's making any statements about this show, it insinuates he doesn't think that like he's
Yeah,
gonna get
he's not like slinking away into
He's
the
black. He's
right. In the court of
blackballed or
public
anything.
opinion, it may
Yeah.
be a little murkier, or maybe a gray area similar to the James Gunn deal. And there's a lot of people right now calling for him to get the live action X-Men stuff. I mean, with the way this has been so far.
Yeah. Yeah. Incredible. Sham, what are you giving this episode? Remember it out of 10.
I give it a 9 out of 10. This is a very, very good episode. I mean, I can't say enough positive things about it. All the action was great. The story was great. Even the like dialogue was great. The slower moments. No real critiques. I mean, I guess you could say the first half was like slower than the second half. I guess I didn't even hate that part, but it just wasn't the second half. And also, like, I can feasibly see things getting better from here. That's why wouldn't give it a 10, because it's like, this isn't a point where I'm like, it couldn't possibly get better from here. It's like, yeah, I mean, we're only halfway through, like, the finale could be a 10 for all I know. I agree, Kendall. I think it definitely has a potential to reach that like Clone Wars season 7 level.
Still haven't seen anything like that when it comes to animation or even live action.
Yeah, that was special. That was a special finale. I mean, so
I gotta watch this joint. I mean, we got talking about it.
I mean, it's basically a movie. You don't even really have to watch the rest of the show. You just have to watch the last 4 episodes.
Yeah.
Why do you want to be broadcast on a news special? Now again, maybe like it hasn't aired yet. Like maybe we're seeing that, but that's not gonna be shown on TV. Like I don't know, but like that would like I don't know if that would I don't know why would he even be there while there's cameras rolling and stuff like that. Well, as paranoid as they made him out to be.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
And one thing Bo DeMeo did clear up was some people were coming at Magneto. With some allegations with, how old was Rogue, at the time. It was this whole thing when it all played out. He was like, Rogue was, early 20s is what he said. So, in that regard, some people were like, all right, Magneto, he beat the allegations or whatever you want to call it. But,
I mean, the dog mean.
Yeah, still maybe. Yeah, still a little strange, a little Leonardo DiCaprio, whatever you want to call it. But
people want to find it weird. I mean, they can find it weird. I find it a little weird. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
But so there's an age gap.
I mean, look, there's an age gap. It's weird, but would not be the first time or the last time there is a weird age gap between men and women, men. Like that happens. I can speak to it firsthand. That happens. So, not firsthand that I have. You know what I mean? I'm saying I've seen it. That was a really poor. That was a really poor.
Yeah, be careful, Jeff.
Kendall was like, "Pause, hey yo." I'm saying I've seen it. Not me, of course, but yeah, it's so that does happen. So, like it or not, it is what it is. But she did not choose him. And man, you want to talk about sadness? Someone put it on Twitter, man, and like again, like Gambit was an absolute boss in this episode. He showed why he's the GOAT. I love him, but like him,
Jersey and the Raptors.
Him dying, Jersey absolutely Raptors, but him dying before knowing that Rogue chose him over Magneto is also very heartbreaking. Like just adding to that heartbreak. Like he did all of that, saved her, was out there getting. He dropped 81 in that fight against the Sentinels. I mean, him coming in, that shot of him busting through where you see the eyes of the Sentinel and it's like mutants detected and you're thinking, oh my god, this guy is like, this mutant's about to just blow up, these people in this building. And he comes through like riding on the head of a Sentinel. That was crazy, bro. Like, insane. He went for 50 in this game. 50. Like, he was doing stuff. I'm like, yo, this is incredible. And him doing all of that, not knowing that Rogue had chose him, he might have did more. He might have went even harder. Like, the Gambit, man, he really did his thing. But Magneto did too. Magneto was definitely like, last stand. I'm taking all comers. I want all smoke. And he wasn't afraid, and he felt an obligation to those people, especially to those Morlocks. I even dug like kind of like how the Morlocks like how Leech was like, yo, like, oh, like don't worry, like Magneto's got us, and Lamore's like, yo, the X don't rock with